Welcome to the Hustler's Manifesto podcast. We jailbreak from toxic hustle culture. We take hustler back from the belief that bigger is better, security is contingent on compliance, and freedom is reserved for the powerful. I'm your host, Sarah Duran. I'm not here to tell you how to make a quick buck. I'm here to change the way work is done so we can live more meaningful lives right now instead of betting on an uncertain future. If you value this content, please rate it and comment on this podcast wherever you get it. Thanks for being part of the movement. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm so excited for this.
I know, me too. So we connected, which is hilarious because I had Corey on my podcast maybe a couple months ago, and multiple of my podcast guests are like Corey connections. So just like another shout out to Corey. Corey made this connection, and you and I had just like a random like networking conversation, and by the end of it, we were like, yeah, we love each other, and we're gonna like something will come of this. At the very least, a podcast episode. So yes. I'm glad that you're here.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I love being here. And yes, shout out to Corey. Love you.
Love Corey. Okay, so let's jump in. Let's start with the three questions that I ask everyone at the beginning. And the answers to these kind of bleed together, so don't feel like you have to answer them separately. Yeah. So who are you? What is your work, and why do you do it?
Yeah. So hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Everington. So I am the founder, CEO of the Executive Ninja, which is an executive assistance and operations agency. So we support executives, CEOs, small business owners on their day-to-day so that they can focus on income-generating activities, stay in their zone of genius while we handle the mundane things, the things that they don't really love to do, and really just that they could go full throttle in their business, right? And needing that support. And what was the other third question?
No, you're good. Why do you do it?
Oh, I love doing it because I've been in the administrative or EA world for 20 plus years now. I didn't realize it at the time, but it was something that I just consistently loved doing. I always ended I would go into retail, went back to an office work. I would go try something else like hosting, went back to, be an admin at a lawyer's office. And I just really love that I can support people in general. And I'm always the go-to person. So if you guys are old enough to know what Girl Friday is, I mean, I felt like I was like the Girl Friday, right? And I just love helping people. Now, building the agency, though, for me, it was really looking for financial freedom, time freedom, breaking the glass ceiling, because in corporate, you're like limited to this level of salary or level of climbing the ladder, or people assume you're just the help and really there isn't any way to be promoted in a sense. And I wanted to prove them wrong. And the other big part of that too is, hey, why not build a business that I love doing? It is my zone of genius, in addition to being able to also provide job opportunities, right? So what's really close to my heart and my husband's is just really working with homeless shelters, women's shelters. And one of the things that are a big issue, I don't know about in the US, but which I've heard through the news, but in Canada, obviously an issue too, is employment. And people can't get a job for whatever reason that may be. And I wanted to be that small change that I could provide that job opportunity to someone, right? So they would, not only would I make an impact in their lives, they'll be able to make an impact in mine and my clients. And hopefully the bigger impact is more so just supporting our communities and hopefully globally eventually too.
I love that so much. I remember the first time we talked, you said that phrase about breaking the glass ceiling for like administrative folks and getting trapped into this mindset where like you can only make X number of dollars as like an admin person or a VA or an EA. I also like my first job was as a teacher. And then after that, I had a variety of like admin, operations, office manager type of jobs. And I had those jobs all through college because my parents own their own business and I was basically like their office manager.
Yeah.
And just like you, I was like, I'm so good at this. Like, this is my zone of genius. Like, I'm so good at this. And I was incredibly appreciated by the people I worked for. Like, I will not say, like, I will credit those people to seeing me as an equal member of their team and bringing me into important strategic conversations that I'm not sure that like all EA, VA admin folks get pulled into. But what you said resonated with me so much because I was like, these are the people, like these people are the glue of the organization. Like these people are the things that like make the ship run. And it's not that like the C-suite or the upper leadership is not important. It totally is. But so many times I work with people, and this is why like my business ended up being so lucrative too, is like none of your like vision and strategy matters if you can't operationalize it and if you can't execute it. And so many of those big picture thinkers, which we 100% need to, are just not good at operationalizing and executing.
No.
And it was I ended up going like slightly a different direction where I just like spun it into more of like a project management focus, which was how I was able to break the glass ceiling, was to like call myself something different and take it to a different, slightly different place. Although I think almost all admin people are at heart project managers.
Yes.
But it resonated with me so much what you said, because I just watched it. I felt that that's one of the reasons why I went out to start my own business, is I was like, I felt trapped in like this like admin operations world where I didn't feel like I was getting the right opportunities in order to like keep moving up.
No, I agree 100%. And the funny thing is, back at corporate too, like there was situations where they needed me operationally. Like one executive would be tired of hiring and they're like, Rachel, find that person. And I'm like, but that's your job, not mine. Right. And that's when I really started to realize like, oh yeah, like what you said, like, I'm really good at this. Like that I tend to think that I wasn't fit to sit at the leadership table because of my title. Like again, the help, right? I'm not only breaking the glass ceiling in like that corporate world, but also breaking the glass ceiling in the online world. So when I started my business, I was just a VA. And for those who probably may know my story, but when I first started, I was charging clients $10 an hour. But at that time, VA had been around for a good couple of years, but it was still newish. People didn't know what was a VA and how they can leverage one. And I think after like my first year in business, and then I kind of went back to that mindset back in corporate, like, oh, I'm so good at this, because there were so many transferable skills, right? But then I remember being in the Facebook group and people like new VAs would come in and be like, oh, well, how does one start a business, or how does one earn like 5,000 a month or 10,000 a month? I don't understand. And people are like, well, you need to handle tech and you have to be an operations manager. You know, there's no way you can earn 5,000 being in like EA, just doing admin work. And I saw that post. I'm like, bullshit. And so I'm like, I want to prove them wrong. So that was like my goal in the beginning stages of my business, was like proving people wrong. And I did. You know, people thought I couldn't have my business. Proved that wrong. People thought I couldn't earn 5,000 or more in my business. Proved that also wrong. People thought that I couldn't hold a team, that would be so hard to find like team and supporting clients and continuously grow that. Again, I proved that wrong, you know? So to me, like breaking glass ceilings is not just about the money, but like, again, like that leadership, that next level of support. And how does that really like look like as a person and as a business, right? As a whole.
Yeah. So. And I hear you saying it, and this is not like calling you out, because I say the same thing too, but it's like, we're conditioned to say just a VA, or you know what I mean? Just like I would sit at the table in some of the places that I worked before I started my own business, of like their board meetings or other things. And I was like, in my head, I was like, I'm just the office manager. Right. And again, like I had some of the most amazing bosses who like saw me as an equal player on the team and brought me into sit at those tables. So It was almost like more of a limiting belief within my own mind. Not to say I also worked with and for people who like did not invite people like me to those tables. So like not to say that doesn't also happen. But it is The other thing that it makes me think of, which like hadn't occurred to me until just now, is like something else that I'm really fascinated by is just this. I feel like there's this stigma around doers versus thinkers. And I think that happens in the corporate world with like quote unquote admin folks versus quote unquote leadership folks. I also see it happen all the time in like the blue collar versus the white collar world. Whereas like my parents own a painting contracting business. And so my entire childhood, like my mom sort of like ran the office and my dad was like in the field. And so my dad was someone who like physically like worked with his hands every day. And I cannot tell you how many comments he overheard by people that he worked for about like telling their kids, like, this is why you go to college so that you don't end up like this. And just this stigma around like people. I just think there's like a parallel between people like in the blue collar world, the stigma against people that like work with their hands versus people that like go to college and get to just like work with their brains.
Yes.
And this thing where I think there's an interesting parallel to people who are the doers or the executors in a company versus like the big picture thinkers and like the stigma that goes along with that.
Which I've built a multi six-figure business and I didn't go to college. Like I did for like momentarily, I became a legal assistant temporarily. I hated that world. And so I left. So to me, I'm like, why did I even start going when I wasn't even going to like stick with it? So, I mean, to each their own. I mean, we hear Gary Vee where he's like, I hated school. It didn't fit for me. And, and he's become like a successful person and he still loves the grind. Like he will put his hands and do the work. I remember actually a conversation with my husband. He said, because him and I follow, the big coaches around the world. And he had actually told me about an interview between Grant Cardone and Gary Vee. And Grant Cardone asked them, who do you think works the hardest? And so I think Gary Vee along the line said, hands down, me, right? And I think Grant Cardone got a little offended, right? And because he thought he was bigger than Gary Vee and, and he's like, well, I got this and I got that and I got this. And so again, I think teach their own as far as their perspective, how Gary Vee took it as like hands on everything. I'm willing to do the dirty work. So that's his definition of working the hardest versus Grant Cardone was more thinking about like, no, not touching the thing, being like working smarter, but not harder. And, being able to reinvest and amplify that way. And so again, like it's just two different worlds, and not to say either of them are wrong or either of them are right either. But I think just looking at different lenses like that, and like to your point with your dad being hands-on and yet being this amazing business owner, you know what I mean? People just don't get that world that like it's all integrated, right? And they don't understand because they haven't been there. I always say like every single person needs to work in retail, right? And I always feel like if everyone did, I think it would totally be a better world as a people being a human being, as well as like whether they run their own business or not, that they understand like that customer support and treating someone as a human being too. Right.
Totally. So I think that's so true. And I think you're absolutely right. It's not to say that one is more important than the other, but it's just, I feel like the way that things get represented a lot of times in the world of work. Yes. And especially when you think about how people get paid, it just is super interesting to see it like play out in this way where it's like the thinkers versus the doers. And a lot of times, at least in my experience, like I'm not going to make a blanket statement. We'll let the listeners, think about how this has resonated with them in their own experience. But in my experience, there have been so many instances too, where I'm like the thinkers, the doers don't always get as much credit as the thinkers do, right? Even though like they're 100% at the table, like helping, it would never have been pulled off without the doers, right? So yeah, it's 100% necessary to have both. It's just fascinating to me how like one gets positioned as like more important or better than the other and how that ends up being reflected in pay structures as well.
Yeah, I think of it as everyone has their own role, right? So if I take my specific industry, EA, VA, whatever title puts on it, I usually tell my clients that like, because they're like, well, what's the difference, right? Like I could hire a $5 VA, which I do not condone, by the way, people. But like a VA versus an EA, for me, I do say like, okay, a VA, if we look at the the larger amount of like VAs who are doing admin work, yeah, like they're just like the task doer, give them the task, they'll do it. And not to say they're not thinkers either. There's obviously they have to think to do the task and do it with quality, right? But as an EA, it takes it up a notch. So it's not even just thinkers, because again, VAs can do the same as well, but it's more like the decision maker, right? Mm-hmm. You work so intimately with the executive or the business owner that we know how they think. We know how they're going to execute. We're used to the decisions that they're making, that we basically become their next decision maker if they're not around, right? So like everyone has their role. And a lot of my clients, they have both. They have a VA and they have me as in like my team as an EA, right? Because they all play a different role within their organization. And like you said, nothing is not better than the other or anything. It's like, what are their particular needs for that specific VA and for that specific EA too?
Right? Exactly. Yeah, I think that's super smart. I was a couple of weeks ago, I wrote a proposal for a new client for mine, for my business. The client facing side of my business is project management, specifically for research projects for universities. So like large scale grant funded research projects. And when I like call myself a quote unquote project manager, but I price myself as a strategic consultant, like a partner, right? And so it is, and part of it, like I think the terminology is interesting, because I always have to go in and like explain to people like, hey, if you're interviewing multiple project managers, like depending on how people are positioning themselves, like I'm different than someone who's just like like you tell them what to do and they do it. Like I'm like a strategic partner in your project. I come in, I've done this a million times, and I can help you. Like I know exactly how things should pan out from A to Z. And so it's interesting because I think part of this is about the terminology is important both internally and externally, so that you're seeing yourself the way that you want people to see you on the outside. And at the same time, I think you're absolutely right about like part of it is the terminology matters because you're breaking down boundaries around how people see certain types of positions too. But it is that like strategic partnership aspect where like the people which I would assume is probably true about you, is like when I discovered that I was so good at this, it was because the people that I worked with were like, they didn't even have to think about it anymore. Like I was just running their projects. Like it wasn't like they were like telling me what to do. It was like, I just got to the place where I was like, oh, I just run this project. Like you almost do, like you do, in my case, the research things, and I do like everything else, and you don't have to worry about it.
Exactly. And to your point with like how you show up internally versus externally, how people like see you and depending how you position yourself, like back in the day, like for me, again, like it was really getting over the mindset of like, oh, I'm not just the help. Like I could be your partner in this business, like, know, and so shifting that. And even now, and I realize obviously with, self-development and how we as entrepreneurs always like grow, we're always hiring coaches, we're always learning. And it was a huge mindset shift that like when I jump into sales calls or when I'm in a network group, that I'm no longer talking as a VA or EA person, right? It's like, I don't know if people will be able to see like the video here, but like, one person's higher up and then the EA VA is like below them. And mentally now I've shifted that where it's all equal, right? I am talking to you now as a business owner and not just the help, right? So I think that like having that mindset shift and being allowed me a much more confidence to speak like, I'm the shit, you need to hire me, right? And boom, my sales call, like I close them like 95% of the time, like that's how good like such a huge mind shift can do for your business. And again, when you are working with the clients too, the boundaries, the way they communicate with you is like whole next level of respect, and they will see that, yeah, you are a task doer, that you can execute, that you can run the project. But at the same time, there's this next, like a different energy of like, oh, like I better piss her off or she can fire me as her client. Right.
Yeah.
So,
it was just making me think about too, so on the coaching side of my business, the folks that I work with primarily are like solopreneurs. So like freelancers, consultants, like pretty much like single person businesses. Maybe they have a VA or an EA or like other types of support folks, but oftentimes I see that people get into this narrative with their business where they, as a solopreneur, they start getting really successful. And what people tell them is the next step, whether it's a coach or society or whatever it is. The next step is you start outsourcing everything. Like you grow your business, you scale, you start hiring people, you start outsourcing the quote unquote doing, right? And then and sometimes that 100, like to your point, everyone has a role, and like sometimes that is the right next step for people. Sometimes what I see though is that people get like tricked into thinking that like having a team is the next step, and that's not actually what they want, because managing people is hard. And B, what also happens is that they end up outsourcing the doing, which is what they liked doing in the first place. And so just like going back to the like stigma around doing versus thinking is like or strategizing, not just thinking, but like whatever you want to call it, like big picture thinking, is we get tricked into thinking that like once you get successful, you don't have to do the doing anymore. And maybe you don't have to, but maybe you still like doing it. Because I see so many people get so far away from like the parts of their business that they actually like to engage in. And then all they're doing is just like managing people. And they're like, yeah, this isn't fun anymore. Like, what happened to all the work that I used to like to do? Now I just pay other people to do what I used to love to do.
Well, and to piggyback on that too, what I see on my side is when they do hire my team or whoever they're hiring, the issue is that they think that they hire a team and they can completely check out, right? And think that their business is going to grow. I'm like, no, this is still your business. We're here to support you, not to run your business or own it. If that is the case, pay me the money, but yeah, people, I just had this conversation actually with one of our corporate clients, and he felt the same way, because now he had a business that we worked with, his corporate business, just before the pandemic had hit, and he sold it. We had helped him exit out of that business. Someone bought it, and he's back again as a client, and we're trying to ramp him up. But him and I, he's working as a consultant now, as one of his like business pillars, and we were having an amazing discussion about like the people that he's even working with, like other corporate executives, that because they've hired him, they think they can completely check out. And he's like, no, dude, you still have to do the work, right? And so it just amazes me all the time. And yeah, so I think like, the way what you've seen and what I've seen, like that's just not the way to definitely move forward with a team. Absolutely not, because you're not going to go anywhere. And for me, I think that if you're going to hire a coach, like, and you deal with like solopreneurs and freelancers, and me as a coach, I deal specifically with VAs and Es. Like everyone's different, but really understanding when you do hire like Sarah or myself or somebody else, that they're not spitting out textbook either. Just because their coach, like Sarah's coach, my coach said me this, I'm going to spit the same information to the next person. No, I think that it has to be very supportive, and like, how does one solopreneur that works with you, Sarah, like how can you help them specific to them as a human being and their personality and how they work, and also what their business is, right? It's going to be customized, but people like to throw all these textbook bullshit and think like that is the Bible, and they move forward with it. Like, people, you need better buying decisions for sure.
Yeah, I think that it's so true. And that is like how, like, over the years that I've been doing this, I've completely changed the way that I coach people to focus first and foremost. Like, the first thing I do with people is this like triad of like who you are, why you do what you do, and what you want. Because those are the things that most people don't, me included, think about and super intentionally. And then you get caught up in this thing, like whether it's like what I said before, you get caught up in like, this is what scaling looks like. And so I'm just going to follow the map of what other people have told me scaling looks like, even though like I actually didn't think about like, do I want to manage a team? Do I want it? Like, what do I actually want out of this? And it's hard because as a coach, people come to you and they're like, I need you to fix my business, right? They're like, there's a problem with my business. And I'm like, yes, I see that there's a problem with your business. And I promise, like, we have to do this first. Because if we start just like, quote unquote, fixing your business, without doing those foundational pieces first, then you get into a place where you're just like throwing more bad in with the bad. You're just like rebuilding a structure that still isn't like giving them what they want or need. But it's like band-aid approaches where and again, I've 100% do this. That's how I figured it out. Like I've done it over and over again in my business too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, it's I think especially when people are like deciding to grow a team, it's something that I see people take more lightly than they need to over and over again, because I'm like, once you are responsible, which is why I'm a solopreneur, like I watched my parents, and my parents still have their business now. Like having employees is hard. Being responsible for other people's livelihoods is hard. And
I call that peopling.
Yes, peopling is hard. It's a huge responsibility. I watched my parents multiple times like not take a salary so they could pay their employees, right? Like you have to be so it shifts the game in a way where like you're not just thinking about yourself and your own livelihood and what you want. You are now like responsible for co-creating that with other people. And it's not, to your point, it's not just about like, oh, I'm just going to outsource this and then I'm just going to go chill in the Bahamas. Like that can't be what it's about.
No. And that's one of the key things that I even realized too when I first started the VA world. Everyone was showing about digital nomad and this and that. And like, again, not to say that's complete bullshit because it can happen, but again, that depends on the business model that you decided to take and what your lifestyle is, right? So you say, I know you have a kid, you're married, okay, and you're a solopreneur. Well, me, I'm married, I have a kid, I have a team, and we deal with different types of people too. But again, like my lifestyle is not a digital nomad. I have other commitments that need my feet on the ground over here at home. I homeschool my kid, and then for me too, like, again, like I run a team. Like I do have an operations manager that supports me in running the team too, but that doesn't mean I check out and not support her to help run the team either. Right. So yeah, no, peopling is definitely hard. And is based on my experience for the last 7 years is I still love it. And I think it takes special kind of people to, either handle the business on your own solo, like yourself. And it's just the same equal hard, me running a team and peopling and dealing with problems day in, day out, right? Yep. And to note, I want to put a side note here, just because if you do have a team and there are issues that come up day in, day out, does it not mean you're failing and does not mean your team is failing. That's just business. There's our ultimate title as business owners are problem solvers, so it's bound to happen. It's bound to happen every day. I see it in my clients' business all the time. And it's just, that's the lifestyle of business, doing business. So
100%. I totally agree with you, because I think it's just about making that decision consciously, like being very like, especially once you get into the realm of like, having other people's livelihoods attached to your business, is you just need to be super conscious about like, is this what I want? Because now I'm like bringing other folks in the mix. And you are right. That is why, like, I sort of feel like I don't ever want to have like a full blown legit team, but like, who knows? Like, life is flexible. But at least at this point, like, I make a very conscious decision because like, I want to be able, I wouldn't call myself a digital nomad by any stretch of the imagination, but like, I want to be able to like take 2 weeks off and not have to look at my email. And I want to be able to like, do the kinds of things that like you don't necessarily get to do when you are an entrepreneur running a team. So yeah, it's and you're right. Like it's not easy. It's not, neither one of them are easy, but peopling is especially hard.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, every bigger companies that have been able to do it as far as managing a team, like right now, well, one, I'm a small boutique agency. So, I chose that business model not to have like 100 clients and 100 ninjas. One, because I really love being intimate with my clients and my team in general, like a small but mighty team. We're able to build a greater impact with our clients. And most of our clients too amp up their packages too. So it feels like we're already gaining multiple clients just by them upping it. But my operations manager and I have always continuously tested out, like me being off 3 days, a week, 2 weeks, and see what type of shit actually goes on fire. And then we pivot, we change. Okay, what needs to happen in order for Rachel not to check her email while she's out for the next couple of days, right? And so I think the key thing for me with peopling and having like that operations manager is just communicating and them being on the same page with me with my mission and my vision and my values, right? So when I talk about, like, my team are all subcontractors. So when I'm talking about my clients, I don't say it's my clients, right? I say it's our client, because even though they're subcontractors, they're still part of my team, right? They're they're faces of my company too. And so when they're on that same like buy-in of being able to support me, each other, and the clients, I think it becomes a more easeful, not easier, but easeful to kind of just, okay, I can take a step back and I'll have full faith on my team that they can handle their own ship, right? So, and then again, if anything breaks, it's just another opportunity to like, how can we make it better then next time?
Yep. And that is the art of peopling, right? It's like finding the right people, empowering them to be equal, members of your team, which in my experience is actually easier with contractors because they come to the table being like independent operators.
Yes.
But yeah, it is the art of peopling. I want to touch on one other thing that you said before we run out of time too, is one of the things you said in the beginning is part of why you do this work is to also be able to just like be able to employ others, right? And it's super interesting because I see admin work and doing of whatever nature as like one of the best entry points into freelancing. So like whenever I'm talking to people who are like considering being freelancers, and some people consider being freelancers and they're like, I do X and I want to do that as a freelancer. And some people are like, I just hate working for other people and I want to go be a freelancer. Like, how do I do that? Being a VA or an EA is like always my first answer, because I'm like, this is the easiest entry point for you have multiple skill sets. You can figure out how to leverage them effectively in this kind of environment, and then be able to also like dabble and see like what resonates the most with you, and specialize a little bit more from there. But I just wanted to circle back on that because you said it in the beginning, and I didn't want to lose it in the stream.
Yeah, I mean, we can totally touch on it. So for me, when it comes to, it is an amazing entry point. For me, when I train VAs or EAs, there's two things I have them keep in mind. One, that they are coming to the table skilled at what they do. There's transferable skills from their corporate 9 to 5 that whatever they're currently doing, it doesn't have to be corporate, but like there's transferable skills that they don't even realize they do because it comes naturally to them. So sometimes you as a business owner or coach, you need to pull that out of them, right? And so that they can see the amazingness that they actually hold that they don't see themselves. Hence why we hire a coach. And then the other part is too, that even though if they say they were an admin or an EA at a previous job, it's also, there's still a learning curve to transfer from 9 to 5 desk to now the online space. There's so much still to learn. But it can, like I said, easeful to be able to transfer it and figure things out. I think you definitely need to have the grit, be able to figure it out, be resourceful, and then also being able to communicate, like ask for the help, being able to have conversations, difficult conversations, good conversations, any type of like communication, like with people. And I think that just kind of, that's how it allows you to like build and transfer from like, going to an EA or VA or freelancer, that type of thing. I do want to make a note though, because you did mention that, the people that you work with, they say like, well, I don't want to report to anybody or like work for someone. At the end of the day, and I actually expressed this to my team on our team meeting this week, at the end of the day, it's still a job, right? And you are going to be working for somebody. Like, even if you have clients, they're coming to you for support, for requests that are coming in to you that you would need to do. You're still technically, it's just a tiny mindset shift that instead of saying working under them, you're working with them, right? See the difference? And so I think people need to understand that, like, because I see so many VAs, especially during the pandemic, when we had that big wave of everyone shifting because people lost their jobs, everyone got so confused because they thought like, how do I make this work? How do I become an entrepreneur? How do I how do I continue to build this business? And everyone got lost because they thought that they could be an entrepreneur just like that.
Mm-hmm.
But then they still had the mindset of an employee mindset, and or even, some saying that they're EAs, but really they were just VAs, as an example, with based on my definition, right? So, but yeah, if circling back to your point, if someone does want to become a freelancer, the best entryway is a VA and EA. And I say that because a lot of skills are transferable. You could use the current equipment that you use on a daily basis. All you need is a laptop and a phone, internet. And then everything else is figure outable. There's so much resources in the online, on Pinterest, on Google, on YouTube, and Facebook groups, that certain things that tasks that you would be doing is more or less like things that you would probably just do yourself as well as a business owner. So if someone were to say, hey, I need you to schedule a meeting on my Google Calendar, well, you probably do that yourself as a freelancer or as a business owner anyway. So of course you could apply that to your client's work as well.
Yep. 100%. And I totally agree. I think that's a really important caveat, something that like I work with the folks that I coach all the time, and still, even, almost 10 years in myself, still find myself having to like make sure that I'm thinking with a boss mindset instead of an employee mindset, because it is a huge mindset shift. And the accountability, I think, is one of the key pieces of it, where people are used to even if you didn't necessarily have a 9-to-5 job, like say you just decided to do this right out of college or right out of high school or whatever, still, like, even education trains us, like everyone is trained to be an employee. People are not trained to be entrepreneurs, right?
Right.
I would say even people with MBAs are not trained to be entrepreneurs.
Oh, no, absolutely not. Nope.
And so it's a thing that you have to unlearn and learn how to like hold yourself accountable in ways that are different than the way that like other people were holding you accountable before. Because you're right, like, and that I think goes back also to business model, is like it also is about very intentionally choosing your business model so that you're not like, if you are selling yourself as like an on-call 24/7 VA, which I would not advise, but if that's how you're positioning yourself, then like you have to be able to live up to that. That means that you probably are never taking a legit vacation and like, right? So those kinds of things, like it's all about like how you think about your business model, going back to like, what do you need to get out of it for your life? Because I literally, and like I'm this is not like hyperbole, like I never drop a ball ever. But I do take like a legit like week off. And I have expectations with my clients, like my business model allows for that. My client relationships and expectations with my clients allow for that. But it is all goes back to like forming your business in a way that it lends itself to your unique strengths and what your life needs to get out of your business. And not just expecting, like you said, in the pandemic, I think everyone sees those like ads or whatever that's like, hey, work from home, like just get on the phone like a few hours a day and like make 6 figures, and like that's not exactly how it works, right? So I think you're absolutely right. Like it is a mindset shift, and it's something that like I still to this day continue to like refine and learn over and over and over again.
Absolutely. And if you're going to shift to the world of entrepreneurship, I mean, the quickest way to learn is just to execute, take action. Like, we're all going to fail. I'm sure, like, Sarah, yours and mine combination of shit we totally failed at during the first couple of years is probably up to like what, $1,000, $5,000, things that we failed on. And honestly, I think that's how we grew pretty fast, right? I tried, I failed. Okay, that went wrong. So let me try it this way now. Especially when you don't have the financial means to hire a freaking, $5,000, $10,000 coach to work with, right? Again, like having the grit and being resourceful is just going to get you so far, even if you don't have the financial means to invest in a coach at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I think that we get trapped so often in just like, perfection being the enemy of doing.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
it's scary, right? But like you're not going to know, it's always going to be a journey. You're never
Mhm.
like, to this day, I am still like constantly shifting. Like, how do I talk about what I do? How do I talk about the problems that I solve for my clients? How do I better position myself when I'm doing sales calls with people? And it's an iterative process. Like, you learn by every time I have a project or a client, I learn differently about like, okay, this is how I position it differently. This is how I price it differently. This is how I structure it differently. Yeah, you 100% learn by doing.
Yeah, I'm a recovering perfectionist, so I truly know that if anyone follows Enneagram, I used to be a 1, which is all about like perfectionism and making sure it's all right. Now, with all my years of experience in entrepreneurship, I'm now a 3. Like, it's so interesting to see, and if you read those definitions, you're like, ah, like it's part of that journey that has happened for the last 7 years for myself, you know. And I'm for that perfectionism is like out the door. All I care about is taking action. Is it going to get me the outcome, the result that I wanted? Cool. And I want to touch a little bit about the team too. And for team, you were talking about like you know, where people check out or people think like they have to hire fast, and then you know they outsource the thing that they love doing. One of the other things that I always think about too is when you do hire a team, really understand what you really want to like outsource. What do you love? What do you like ish? And what do you hate? Right. And I think, and then also listing it, like what I do with my clients is do an activities inventory checklist. What do you do day in, day out in your business? And then cut the shit out that you know that you could probably outsource, and then what you can keep for yourselves. Like you said, like keep the love, you know, like that's what we do in our business. And just because you love and you're executing, right, that does not mean again that you failed because you kept the things of what you love doing, right?
Yeah, I think that's 100% true. I always have people think about it with like I'm not going to remember it. The Venn diagram, the like overlapping Venn diagram of like, what do you love? What are you
Oh
good
yes. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
at? Because, and it's never one of the, like, it's actually not, like, I think the problem with that diagram is like, it's actually not that thing in the middle. Like, it's not the thing that checks all of those boxes. It's like, it's subjective. Like, you may love doing something that like that you're not very good at.
Mm-hmm.
And like, maybe you're going to hold on to it anyways. It's going to make you a ton
Yeah,
of money. Maybe not, but you're holding
yeah.
on to it because you love it. And, you know, it's always that like math that you do as a business owner where you're like, okay, like, maybe I'm going to have to like have this client for a little while that isn't exactly like the ideal thing that I want to be doing, but like it checks these other boxes for me. And so it helps me, you know, get down the road to do this other thing eventually, or helps me build a relationship for future work or whatever it is. And so, yeah, it's definitely always like a combination of those things, but it just going back to being intentional. I just
Yes.
recognize it over and over again in myself and in the folks that I work with, where it's like we're acting without like intentionally thinking about like, why am I doing this? And like, what do I want to get out of it?
Yeah.
You're just like doing because it's quote unquote just like the next thing that you were supposed to do.
Right. And the other thing that people get caught up on when hiring a team too, that you know that saying where like, oh, hire people who do it better than you, right? There's a caveat to that, right?
Mhm.
As well. Like marketing. No one can do it better. They're not you, right? So yeah, you can hire a copywriter, but like, and they can emulate the way you speak or whatever. And I think that goes back to the whole like checklist of like, what do you love doing? What do you not like doing? Right. And then finding the ones that you don't really like doing and not touching ever. Yeah, absolutely. Find someone who's 100% better than you. But for others, for me, for my team, because we play more or less the same role as EAs, you know, like I still train my team, you know, continuously because there's always something new to learn. Everyone's different. The way they learn is different. Our clients are different. And for me, I used to think like, oh, I'm probably a shitty leader because I feel like no one's like 500% better than me. You know what I mean? But also everyone's their what do you call it? The life path is different, right? I probably have the most experience. And so I think of it as like having that mental shift of like, as long as they can complete 80 to 90% of what I'm able to do, that is good enough. And it still keeps us growing and making impact.
Yep. 100%. I think that's a perfect place to end on. This has been lovely. We'll definitely have you come back in the future. And tell us where we can find out more about you. And we'll make sure to link everything in the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to visit my website, you can go to theexecutiveninja.com. And I'm on socials too, but my most playground that I play in is Instagram, and you can find me there at Rachel Everington.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Rachel.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate you.